FPL Game Week 18 top transfer targets with just a couple of days until Game Week 18 and Bukayo Saka looking like he is ruled out until at least March. In today's video, we're going to have a look at some of the best players to buy, but we are really going to be focusing on that big question, those midfielders. Who is the best Bukayo Saka replacement? He is owned by over 80% of active managers in Game Week 17, and with him being out, he has massive repercussions, not only in our midfield with a replacement, but also what it does in defenders like Trent Alexander-Arnold, and in forwards, potentially buying back Erling Haaland or going to the likes of Alexander Isak or Gabriel Jesus. What's up everyone, FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here, and happy Christmas Eve everyone. Thank you all very much for joining. I know it's a packed schedule. I'm sure you're all celebrating, and if you're not, thank you all very much for joining with me anyway. In today's video, we'll have a look at best players to buy. Before we do that, this video is being powered by Fantasy Football Scout, and I have a couple of new graphics, which we'll talk through at the beginning of this video, which is all taken and built from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. And if you want to check it out yourself, you can do so with a link in the description. If not, you can tune into these videos every single week to have a look yourself at how I'm using it. The first graphic we are now going to have every single week. I'm having these built by a fantastic designer, and I hope you like them. I'll post them on Instagram. I'll post them on Twitter as well as we get closer to the deadline. But if you watch these videos, you will get them sooner and earlier than in every other sort of the night you will if you're posting them. The first one is a fixture ticker for the next 6 weeks ranked by difficulty. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking, but I think it looks nice and it's a great way to set the scene. Crystal Palace are up there at number 1. They've got Bournemouth, Southampton in the next 2. Then it is Chelsea, but then Leicester, West Ham, Brentford in the next 3. So Ismaila Sarr, who people are talking about a potential replacement. You could also have a look at Daniel Munoz in defence. Also high up the list, you've got Liverpool. That's why Trent Alexander-Arnold and Mo Salah are going to be popular. Newcastle, Chelsea also high up. Now, as you get lower down, you've got Manchester United and Spurs middle. And once we go lower down to the bottom, if you're owning the likes of Mateus Cunha, if you're owning the likes of potential West Ham options, Brentford options, even Everton, they are entering quite a difficult run of fixtures. And then the next up is a little bit of data. I don't try to use too much data in this video, but basically what you've got here is on the left-hand side, you've got attacks, you've got teams ranked by expected goals per 90 minutes so far this season. And on the right-hand side, you've got expected goals conceded, again, with the best at the top on both sides. You've then got it ranked over the last 6 game weeks as well, just to have a little bit of a comparison point about maybe whether teams are being better or teams are looking a little bit worse. But of course, the last 6 can be relative to the fixtures that we've played. The best attacks in the league so far this season: Liverpool, Chelsea, and interesting, Bournemouth in as the 3rd attack above Spurs and Manchester City, who are slowly dropping down the list. We also have Arsenal up there, but you can see over the past 6, Arsenal have been right up there, particularly because of the XG they did put up against Crystal Palace at the weekend. Looking in terms of defences that we've had, Arsenal have been the best defence so far this season, and over the last 6, just 0.66 expected goals conceded per 90 over the past 6, which is a crazy good return. Liverpool also up there, looking at the likes of their fixture runs they've got over the next few weeks. Aston Villa, Fulham, Newcastle, all really high up in terms of defensive rankings, but down at the bottom. I wouldn't be looking to invest if you've got a Mark Flecken, you've got a Manchester City defender, although their fixtures look okay over the next few weeks. If you've got a Verbruggen in goal, their defensive data so far this season has not nearly been good enough. So before we have a look at that big question of Bukayo Saka replacements, I do want to rattle through a few defenders that you might be looking to buy. If you're going for a cheap option, Howson, who did score again, I've been recommending for a fair few weeks now, scored again against Manchester United and now has a good run of fixtures. Crystal Palace, Fulham, and then Everton at home in the next 3 games. If you want another option who he rotates actually really well with, that is going to be Timothy Castagne of Fulham. A nice run. He does go away to Chelsea this week, so maybe not the best entry point, but at 4.2, he's the best Fulham defender to buy at a much cheaper price than someone like Anthony Robinson, who I think is up to 4.9 million now. The cheapest option, though, if you need a cheap option, is actually going to be Wood of Southampton. 4 million, probably the best 4 million option to go with. Maybe Southampton with a clean sheet against Fulham with a new manager might be slightly better defensively, and they have a pretty nice run between now and about game week 30 if you need a set and forget sort of fifth defender, last on your bench, 3rd defense player for you. Into the mid-price bracket, I really like Daniel Munoz. His underlying data is better than the rest of the ones we've got here. There's no Anthony Robinson in here just because I prefer Castagne at Fulham, and there's no Lewis Hall as well. Despite the returns, the fixtures get a little bit more tough over the next few weeks. So if you're looking to buy, Munoz is number 1, Kirkez is closely following behind number 2, and actually maybe better defensively, but you could go with someone like a Howson, and Munoz is only the real option I'd look at Crystal Palace. We saw them not be nearly as good defensively partly when he wasn't in that team. And third of all is going to be Marc Cucurella. If he was at a similar price to someone like a Munoz or a Kirkez, he'd probably in at number 2 or number 1 even. but he is slightly more expensive at 5.2 million. Then into the premium ones, Gabriel remains the best. I do still like the Arsenal defence the best, as we saw with the defensive data at the earlier part of the video. Trent Alexander-Arnold is in at number 2, and with Gabriel being in so many teams, Trent is the big prospect to be buying at the moment with Leicester at home this week, and how good he looked in that Spurs-Liverpool fixture at the weekend. And number 3, despite the difficult fixtures that they've had, despite the performances we've seen, the fixture they've got coming up, Everton at home, Leicester away, West Ham at home, Gvardiol is someone to consider as a bit of a differential because not many people own him anymore. And then we're going to have a look and talk about some forwards before we finally finish up by talking about midfielders. There's no Erling Haaland on here, and there is no Aston Villa forwards. If you want to use the Bukayo Saka money to go right down to a cheap midfielder and free up money to go up to an Erling Haaland, you could. They do enter a really nice run of fixtures. However, still 14.9 million is too much money to be going and spending on him in my eyes. It is a big differential, and if you have the luxury to go and do it, then fine, but I don't think it's worth it. Also, at Aston Villa, if you want to look at Duran, he's okay, but I still think there's going to be a lot of rotation in that forward line. We wouldn't be surprised at all to see Ollie Watkins come back in for that Aston Villa fixture next up and Duran drop to the bench. So for me, there's too much risk in there. A similar thing goes for the Liverpool forwards, and we'll talk about their midfielders as well. There's too many risks of minutes. We don't know who it's going to be that's starting every week. Is it going to be Gakpo, Diaz, Jota is returning? Is it going to be Darwin Núñez? Too many of them without knowing who is fully available, which means these are probably the 6 forwards I'd be looking to buy. Jackson is head and shoulders above the rest. The performances they're putting in, Villa, Man United, Spurs, Wolves, in the next 4 is still a nice run of fixtures. The underlying data for him is by far the best. If you can get to Isak this week, he should be the priority. Then when you go outside of that, it actually gets a little bit more difficult. I've put João Pedro in here, just a little bit of a comparison, but I'm pretty sure none of you are looking to buy João Pedro with the performances him and Brighton have put up recently. The underlying data for him is actually pretty good, and it does match some of the others that you're looking to buy, like Gabriel Jesus and Chris Wood. But I think it's safe to say, if you're looking to buy a forward this week, it's probably Isak, and if it's outside of that, it's probably going to be Dominic Solanke, who did get a couple of returns despite losing to Liverpool, or it is going to be Gabriel Jesus. Now, the big thing for me is Arteta loves players who are in form. He rarely drops players who are performing well, and they've been lacking a little bit of open play threat. And Gabriel Jesus has been absolutely turning the screw there. There is, of course, a slight bit of doubt about his minutes, and probably more of a minutes risk than most of the other players on this list. But when a player is ticking, and with the injury to the likes of Bukayo Saka, it does mean that Jesus might have slightly more assured minutes because they might be moving, Trossard's out on the wing, then they've got Martinelli out on the other wing. They're playing Havertz and Gabriel Jesus through the middle. There's less chance, for example, Trossard going through the middle. There's less sort of moving parts. Gabriel Jesus' minutes with the 5 goals in 2 games, 2 goals in the Premier League and 3 in the Cup, looks like he should be keeping his place. So for me, Isak is number 1. If you have a spare Arsenal slot, Gabriel Jesus is probably number 2. Dominic Solanke, probably number 3, just based off slightly more assured of minutes. I do still like Jackson. If you've got him, he's definitely not a sell. If you need a cheaper option, Chris Wood is nice. João Pedro is a fine hold if you own him. Jimenez is not on this list. Of course, he didn't start. There is that risk of minutes. I do expect him to come back in for that Chelsea fixture because Muniz didn't offer that much though. So then just to talk about midfielders, I did this a little bit more in my transfer plans video, my team selection videos. If you haven't checked that out, look at it in terms of my team, but we'll talk about it in a bit more detail, taking on board a little bit of feedback that you did offer. Of course, if you don't own Mo Salah and you don't own Cole Palmer, they are the obvious replacements. Next up is Spurs. They were quite high up the fixture ticker. I wouldn't be looking at Son. If I was going to be buying a Spurs midfielder this week, it would be James Maddison. Now, he didn't get that many minutes, but partly because the game was kind of over when he did get subbed off against Liverpool. Kulusevski is much more nailed in terms of minutes, but Maddison is probably the slightly more explosive in terms of open play threat when he does play. He did put up a decent bit of XGI in some of the games. It wasn't actually that great against Liverpool, but that's a pretty write-off game. 0.69 against Southampton, 0.44 against Chelsea. 0.41 against Bournemouth is not bad as well. The obvious ones that you could look at is Manchester City. They do have a really nice run of fixtures, but I cannot personally trust and recommend you buying either Phil Foden or Kevin De Bruyne. It looks like there's only space for one of them in the team at the moment. It was Phil Foden that's played the past couple. Kevin De Bruyne had some minutes in that one, didn't play at all against Aston Villa. It's very hit and miss, and with so many fixtures over the Christmas period and their performances, it's just not worth the gamble for me. If you look at Arsenal, really interesting. You could look at just going sideways to another Arsenal player. People are looking at Martin Odegaard because his minutes are really good. He's also likely to be on penalties now that there is no Bukayo Saka as well. However, if I was buying an Arsenal midfielder, it would be Gabriel Martinelli. His minutes have been okay so far this season. He's probably been up there outside of Saka for their other winger. But with Saka out, he's likely to have even more minutes. As we saw against Crystal Palace, when Saka went off, he played 90 minutes. His open play threat was pretty good. 1.19 XGI was really, really good. He did score. And at just 6.7 million, he is my favourite Arsenal midfielder if that is where you want to go. The only slight concern with that, though, is it blocks off Gabriel Jesus. If you're like me, if you've got Gabriel and David Raya in your team and you go with Martinelli, it means you can't get to Jesus if he continues goal-scoring form as he has shown so far this season. The big one that a lot of people will go to is Bruno Fernandes at Manchester United. Underlying data is really, really good, right? 0.86 despite a blank against Bournemouth. 1.37 against Manchester City, although there was a penalty in there. Generally, over the course of the season, he is averaging 0.59 expected goal involvements per 90, which is a pretty good return. However, it depends how much you trust Manchester United. I've already got Ahmad in my midfield, but I do think that Bruno Fernandes is likely to be the one that I can go and bring in. A few others just to mention before we go to some of the cheaper ones. You could go to Brian and Burmo. The fixtures are okay, but they're not the best until about game week 25 onwards. So if you own him, he's a hold. He's probably not a buy new. And a similar thing for Jared Bowen. Yes, they have Southampton away this week, but after that, the fixtures get really, really bad for West Ham. So if you own a Kudus, you own a Bowen, they're good, but they're probably not replacements. Outside of that, let's talk Liverpool. Liverpool was the big one that I missed out when doing my transfer plans team selection video. My big concern, and the reason I didn't mention them, is the lack of security of minutes. Luis Diaz is probably the most likely, but you can see here, against, if we go all the way back, he started against Arsenal, didn't start Brighton, started Villa, didn't start Southampton, started City, didn't start Newcastle, started Fulham, and then started Spurs. There is so much uncertainty, and you have to add in the fact that Diogo Jota is now back. Now, I'm not necessarily certain that Jota is going to be starting this game. He is in as Diogo, but he's going to be getting minutes at some point. 11, 22. He's slowly building up his fitness. I expect Luis Diaz to start the Leicester game, but then who's it going to be? Could it be someone like Cody Gakpo along with Jota? We just don't know. There's too much going on in that Liverpool attack for me personally to take a punt on it. But if you were to buy one, Luis Diaz would definitely be the name that I would pick. A few others that I quite like, you could go with an Anthony Gordon if you've already got Isak doubling up on Newcastle. The minutes look pretty good. The returns have not been bad. The online data has been pretty good as well. He's actually been unlucky maybe not to get more returns than he has. I really like at 7.2. I don't like him as much as a Bruno Fernandes, but I prefer him over someone like a Luis Diaz because of the minutes. Outside of that, you're probably going all the way down to the budget pick. So if we look at under 6.5 million, we're probably looking even further down. We're probably even going, you could go to someone like a Kulusevski we've already spoken about at Spurs. I personally would probably go James Maddison, but it's pretty close between the two. And outside of that, you're going down to below. Fulham have been popular. Not the best performance from Iwobi, but the fixtures long-term look pretty nice. If you're spending that money, though, I expect it to be Ismail Assar. They are top of the fixture ranking that we saw at the beginning of the video. Here's my favourite. If you're coming all the way down to try and afford a Trent Alexander-Isak or something like that, here's my favourite. You could also look at an Ahmad if you don't own him, or you could look at an Enzo Fernandez or a Rodgers. But if you're coming down to this sort of budget, Ismail Assar is definitely the number one pick for me. So just to wrap that all up, I mean, generally the best replacements for Bukayo Saka are Trent and Isak, who are not in their positions. It's making sure you free up money to afford Trent and to afford Isak with the fixtures they've got coming up and the form they're showing. Of course, if you don't own Palmer and Salah, those are the ones I'd be looking to buy. Outside of that, if you're just looking to replacement, I think Bruno Fernandes is number one. I really like Martinelli, but the issue with Martinelli is it might block off a triple Arsenal if you go and want Gabriel Jesus and he continues to perform well. I like Anthony Gordon if you want to go for a double up on Newcastle. If not, it's coming down to a cheaper option to someone like an Ismail Sarr. Those are my top performers, and I think I've covered absolutely everything in this video in 14 minutes. Hopefully that is everything. If you like the new graphic that we flashed up at the beginning, drop a like on the video, subscribe so you get a reminder for when this transfer targets video comes every single week. You can see those graphics, see how things are changing, who are top of the fixture ticket and everything like that. Make sure you follow me on socials for when I do post those graphics as well. If you want to check it all out yourself, it is from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. And breathe. Feel like I've spoken so fast. Anyway, thank you for watching. Let me know who your Bukayo Saka replacement is. I think mine is going to be Bruno Fernandes, despite it meaning I have a double up on the Manchester United midfield. Any questions you have as well, drop it all in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here. There will be, I hope, at the moment, I'm planning on doing a Christmas Day final decisions video. It should be up in the morning. I'm not recording on Christmas Day. Don't you worry. It'll be recorded today on, I don't know what day of the week it is. It will be recorded on Christmas Eve and put out on Christmas Day. So if you want to show your support on the channel, make sure you check that out, like it, subscribe. That would be greatly appreciated. Of course, we'll be back with a stream on Boxing Day at 9 o'clock in the morning as we build up to game week 18. As I said, thank you for watching. 2,000 likes, subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.